you need to fix a disbursement. Now, there are two aspects you need to look at. Does the person want a full disbursement, which is when he is buying a resale, or does he want a part disbursement, which is when he is buying an under construction property and wants money depending upon the progress of the work. So that is one aspect you need to understand. The second aspect you need to clarify is it a first disbursement if it's a part disbursement? Earlier he has taken a part of the loan and now he is coming for an additional disbursement because the work has progressed further. Typically, a full and final first shot disbursement is when the property is either a resale or he is buying a ready construction property. If it's a under construction property, either in a purchase or under self-construction, then typically the lending institution will also not do a full disbursement of the loan, but will disburse in bits and pieces depending upon the progress of the work. Now, either way, whichever, whether it's a first disbursement or a subsequent disbursement, whether it's a full disbursement or a part disbursement, there has to be a demand letter. A demand letter typically can be from, of course, the individual saying that please disburse to me a loan of so much or loan or whatever, and also if it's a developer, then there has to be a demand letter from the developer so that you know that the payment is actually being requested or required to be made by the person constructing the house, which is the developer in this case. Now, if it's a first disbursement, that means the loan has been sanctioned or approved but is being disbursed for the first time, you need to make sure that all the conditions that were put in the approval letter have been met. Typically, these conditions could be submission of certain documents. Or at the time of the appraisal, I discovered that there was another applicant who also owned the property that is proposed to be financed, and therefore I wanted that person to also be included as a co-applicant. The KYC of that person, the income documents, anything else that is required is part of the special condition in the approval or sanction letter. Once all those conditions have been met and the technical person has given the go-ahead and the legal person has given a legal report which is clean, you can fix the disbursement. The fixing of the disbursement itself is required to be also done on the system. Now, don't forget that even when the file was logged in, all data about the individual has already been created, a file number has been created, and therefore all his data is available. An extension of that data collection process is now that on a particular date you have fixed the disbursement. Now, to fix the disbursement, you need to tell the customer that either he or she has to come to the office along with all the other co-applicants or sign all the documents, and nowadays digital signatures are accepted. Once those documents are signed and you are comfortable with all the procedures being completed, you then can even do a transfer via net banking, RTGS, NEFT, whatever it might be. Most lenders will transfer the money directly to the seller. So, for example, if it's a resale, then the money will be transferred directly to the account of the person selling the property, of course under the authority and the approval of the buyer who has given his consent for such transfer. Similarly, if it is a developer, most lending institutions will transfer the money directly on behalf of the buyer to the account of the developer. This way it makes sure that one, the money reaches the developer or the seller immediately, and therefore the buyer is not inclined or tempted to use the money for something else rather than pay the developer, which is what the purpose of the disbursement is. Now, if it is a subsequent disbursement, which means that you've already made a part disbursement and now is coming for a subsequent disbursement, you got to make sure whatever documents that you needed have actually been collected in case you allowed for them to be collected later. But one important step you need to make sure here is that if there is any pre-EMI, which is the interest on the disbursed portion of the loan which was given earlier, whether that pre-EMI has been collected or paid. If not, then that is the first step. You should collect the interest on whatever was disbursed earlier. Remember, this is not the first disbursement. This is the subsequent disbursement. Right? Now, Once that is done and you transfer the money or hand over the check or or effect the disbursement, then the pre-EMI starts. Now there's been a lot of debate from what date does the pre-EMI start. The pre-EMI typically starts from the date of either handing over the check or the transfer of the money into the account of the buyer and or the seller. So this is how disbursements are fixed and actually made. Now once the disbursement date is fixed, then it is possible that for whatever reason you might have to change the date. Typical reasons might be customer comes back and requests a delay or a postponement for personal reasons. Suddenly that day is a holiday because of some national event and therefore unplanned there is no work happening that day, the banks are closed, so you cannot effect the transfer or you cannot make the check payment. Those are things that are more an exception, and then you just reset the date and then change it in the system so that the system records the actual date of disbursement as finally decided between you and the borrower, you being the lender. Of course, if you are the borrower, just flip the argument around and between you and the lender. Once this disbursement is fixed, we now come to probably one of the most important steps in the process, which is the actual disbursement.